AskReddit by Cacao64. What's older than we think? The first carbonated drink to be sold to the public was invented by Swiss watchmaker and amateur scientist J.J. Schweppe in 1783, who sold his delicious sparkling water to thirsty customers in Geneva. In just 7 years, he was doing business so fast that he moved the factory to London and introduced a new flavor, sparkling lemon, to stand out from competitors who were trying to imitate his drink. Another related fun fact: seltzer and spa are where the bubbly water comes from. Prior to industrialization, the only way to get bubbly water was to get it from carbonated springs, two of the biggest which were in need, seltzer and spa, among others. The aux connector that we still use for headphones and speakers was invented in 1877. There have been improvements since, but the basics of it are pretty much the same. https://en.m.wiki.org/phone_connector_open bracket audio close bracket. Thanks for linking it, you are a true hero. Beer is thought to be older than bread. It's much easier to fill a jar with wheat and water, let it ferment, and brew beer than it is to grind grain, mix it, and bake it. So you're telling me sliced bread is the greatest thing since beer? Huh. Sharks. As a species they are older than the rings of Saturn. Holy shit, I've heard of the tree thing, but this is new. Any sources? Wristwatches. Queen Elizabeth I got one in 1571. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/watch wristwatches Just going to drop this here. https://en.m.wiki.org/wiki/mechanical_galleon dart. We had alarm clocks that rode themselves down a table and shot off mini cannons in the 1500s. National Geographic was founded in 1888. Same year as Foster's and Jack the Ripper. I was really surprised to discover when Oxford University was founded. They don't know the year for sure, but they know there was definitely teaching going on there in 1096. Another commenter above said that Oxford isn't even the oldest university, but it's the most well known. The fact that the lighter is older than the match shook my head as a kid. It also gave me the curiosity to question things that seems obvious. When you think about it, it makes sense. The lighter is a simple mechanical concept, some flammable gas and a spark. The match, on the other hand, is a complex chemical reaction. The electric car. What is likely the first human-carrying electric vehicle with its own power source was tested along a Paris street in April 1881 by French inventor Gustave Trouvé. The first crude electric car was built in the 1830s, but it was essentially a semi-functioning model. The electric car was a direct competitor to gasoline-powered vehicles until the 1920s, when roads got better. People started driving further than the range of an electric car, and the world started finding major oil reserves. Weren't the first electric cars using lead-acid batteries? If so, when the batteries eventually discharged, did people go somewhere to replace their battery with a new one? Escalators have been around since 1859, though they were called rotating stairs. Yet the US state of Wyoming still only has 2 of them. Cruise control, power windows and automatic headlights. I saw all 3 on a 1955 Cadillac. Oh, and the radio on it had a seek function. Yet my sister drives a car more than a half-century newer without power windows. Touchscreens. We think they are one of the main defining features of modern technology, since they only really got big in the late 2000s, early 2010s, but they were actually invented 55 years ago in 1965. It's kind of crazy to think about, But while most of our grandparents were getting rid of their black and white TVs, researchers already had touchscreen devices in the labs. It wasn't really until the 80s that it really got good, but by 90s it was easily sophisticated technology. In fact, Microsoft even had a Windows XP tablet out by 2001. https://www.yahoo.com/watch?wx6uh90qvee close bracket that had seriously good finger stylus recognition, but it didn't really pick up until smartphones became a thing a decade later. You could also consider the magnetic drawing board to be a touchscreen since it more or less has a stylus and surface for you to draw on, but that was actually invented later than the touchscreen in 1974. Sharks. Sharks as a family are older than trees. The oldest evidence puts sharks in an era where the only multicellular plant was algae. Edit, guys. Sharks did not eat the algae. They ate what ate the algae. The ancient Romans, well, the wealthy ones, had central heating in their homes. You can actually still see the pipes in some of the buildings at Herculaneum. What I think is really cool from Herculaneum is that we're able to recover writing from the libraries there. The pyroclastic floated and turned the papyrus to ash, it preserved in a very damaged state. But thanks to lasers we can see the words that were once visible on the pages. Flushing toilets date all the way back to the Indus River Valley civilization, back in 2000 BC. Ancient Minoans, 3000-1100 BCE, had hot and cold running water and an extensive sewage system. Deleted. How, at nearly 40 years of age, am I just finding out this place exists? It makes Stonehenge look kind of boring by comparison. Oreos. I was shocked to learn that Oreos predate chocolate chip cookies, sliced bread, and my 100-year-old great-grandmother. You're going to make me Google the year, aren't you? 1912 for those wondering. The sentiment that modern society is degenerate and that the youth are to blame is, one of the oldest things we have written down. That I can remember off the top of my head. Cato the Elder complained that the younger generations were becoming too Greek, and Socrates used to complain that the younger generations were ruining their brains by writing instead of memorizing information. There are far more older examples, but those are the oldest I remember. Maybe Socrates was onto something. Edit. A few people have pointed out the Socrates thing as a misquote, so maybe pseudo-Socrates was onto something instead equals L. Socrates, my head hurts. It's because you always on that damn scroll. Brain surgery. In 1997, archaeologists discovered an ancient tomb in the French village of Ensichim from 5000 BC. Which contained the decomposing body of a 50-year-old man with holes in his skull. After a thorough examination, it was determined that the holes, located near the frontal lobe, were caused by a type of surgery, not by forced trauma, and the operation appears to have been successful because the wounds healed before the patient's death. To this day, however, researchers cannot say for sure what exactly the surgery was trying to fix. This might have been trepanation. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/trepanning the deliberate practice of drilling a hole into the skull for medical reasons, for example headaches, epilepsy, head trauma, mental disorders, letting out evil spirits, etc. The oldest evidence of trepanning comes from the Neolithic period 12,000 years ago. Light. It may only take 8 minutes for light to travel to Earth from surface of the sun, but the light bounces around inside the sun for over 10,000 years before it reaches the surface. The name Tiffany. It dates back to the 12th century, and has actually led to a thing in writing called the Tiffany problem, Because you can have a well-researched historical novel that people just don't buy into. Because you named your 12th century peasant Tiffany. It just sounds laughably anachronistic. The Tiffany problem makes me think of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice and the name Jessica. He wanted the love interest, who was Jewish, to have a super exotic name, so he invented the name Jessica. The name has become so common since then that it's totally lost its effect. Contraceptives such as condoms were around a very long time and made of hard leather. There was also a plant, I forget the name, that produced a contraceptive compound at a high enough concentration where women could just eat it and they wouldn't get pregnant. Apparently Romans were horny AF because those plants are extinct now because of overuse. Beer. It's one of the oldest prepared drinks in the world. It not only predates every civilization but actually contributed to their creation. It's a tale as old as time, getting fucking wasted to forget your problems. The year 1990. We are as close to it as we are the year 2050. I was born in 1990 and I hate this. Edit. Got my first gold at 30. Thanks mysterious fellow boomer. Deleted. Yeah, I'm 11 years older than my mother was when she had me. Crazy to think about. I don't know if this counts, but dinosaurs lived on the earth a lot longer than most people think. When you think of dinosaurs, you think of their extinction, but they roamed the earth for 165 million years. Compare that to our 6 million and it's almost mind-boggling, at least to know. Edit. The modern form of humans is 200,000 years old, but if we include our humanoid ancestors, we've been here 6 million years. Edit 2. I get it. Dinosaurs are still around. What I meant to say was the dinosaur era. What's even crazier to me is that for most people in their minds there was dinosaurs, extinction, cavemen, us, like we popped out of the ash of the dinos, but in reality there were about 58 million years between the dinosaurs dying and the first Homo sapiens appearing, where the world was covered in mostly now extinct megafauna. Sure, dinosaurs are cool and all, but why does nobody talk about giant North American ground sloths, cave bears, and lions? There's literally tens of millions of years of interesting non-dinosaur species that most people seem to just not even know existed. We are farther from the release date of the first Back to the Future movie than Marty was from 1955. Social media. Wealthy ancient Romans had a system where they used slaves as scribes and messengers in order to share gossip and art, poetry and news updates with friends in their social circle. Augustus. Call slave. I want to share this joke with Poniatus. Stonehenge. It predates the oldest pyramid in Egypt by nearly 300 years. Always the first wonder in Civ. It would be nice if the army would let me grab it for once, but nope. I've even had a game where Shaka, from the fucking Zulus, built it before me. Google, Reddit, YouTube. It's hard to imagine that they already have been around for 15 years, with Google actually being around 20 years old. Our entire generation has now grown up that cannot remember that it wasn't always there. As someone that was in high school when the internet hit the mainstream, it boggles my mind that pretty much anyone younger than me has no concept of life without the answer to any question imaginable being at your fingertips, hindered only by your patience to sift through the results. Ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids. The ancient Egyptians were as old to the ancient Romans as the ancient Romans are to us. Cleopatra is chronologically closer to us than she is to when the pyramids were built. Netflix. I feel like it is only a few years old, but it was invented in 1997. I remember getting DVDs by mail from Netflix. Contact lenses. Leonardo da Vinci had the idea of contact lenses in 1508 and the first successful contact lenses were made in 1888. In so many fields, he was way ahead of his time. The guy truly was a visionary. Oxford University. It's older than the Aztec Empire. I think this one is actually a reverse of the question. The Aztec Empire is much more recent than most people think. Humans with our intelligence and empathy and rationality. People in the past lacked education and our cumulative knowledge, but even cavemen thousands of years ago didn't differ too much from us. Cave of Forgotten Dreams, a documentary about cave paintings from 30,000 years ago, really drove this home for me. The art there is so expertly rendered, it really shows a thinking and curious mind. The food at the back of your cupboard. I have a bottle of Worcestershire sauce that expired the 28th of April 2009 in my fridge. That means that bottle, A, made the trip from NJ to Florida with me in 2010. B, is the lone survivor from my bachelor pad fridge from 2012 to 2014. C, made it into my fridge when my wife and I bought a house in 2014. It's been sitting there ever since. Touchscreen in cars. That has been around since 1986. My aunt had a Mercury Cougar with a GPS and touchscreen in the 90s. Good call. I think about how crude it is now. I'm assuming because I don't remember that well, but back then it was jaw-dropping. In my experience, a lot of people I know personally don't realize that music cassettes were invented in the 60s. Cassettes didn't really take off in the States until the late 70s, but the first albums released on cassettes hit shelves in 1966. Deleted. My fucking teeth feel itchy now. Law. Roman law was so advanced that there are still large chunks of statutes, in civil law countries, taken pretty much directly from Roman codicy written 1500-2000 years ago. Important maritime laws are adaptations of medieval provisions. Lots of business law statutes borrow heavily from Napoleonic laws. In common law countries, you find stuff like the Statute of Marlborough from the 1200s, still in effect, along with still relevant case law from the 1700s. Commercial aircraft. Most are 10-15 years old, yet a lot of people think they get replaced like cars. They are still very safe though despite their age. Deleted. A lot of fads have this sense of modernity to them, that you have an Instagram influencer pushing a product and everyone leaps onto it in order to be hip and cool, but it's nothing compared to the way people followed trends in the past. I've written about the case of French people having rectal surgery because it was before, but there are dozens of examples. Even something as basic as the fork only became popular because Catherine de' Medici made it trendy in the courts of France. Before then, it was considered positively barbaric because it allowed you to eat too quickly and without grace. And then there are the fashion trends that were literally lethal, like lead oxides to whiten skin for purely aesthetic reasons. After all, pale skin meant you weren't tanned, which was hard to pull off unless you were rich enough that you didn't have to work outside. You don't see a lot of pale farmers. And then you get what we'd call viral challenges today. You think planking was dumb? Well, you would have loved phone booth stuffing. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/phonebooth_stuffing closed bracket comma, which was huge in the 50s and involved trying to cram as many people as possible into a phone booth. Why? Just because. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The Stanley Cup. It predates the NHL, and if you look at the history of teams that have won it, there is a year where it wasn't awarded due to the Spanish flu pandemic. The top of it is the original trophy, but the rings on the bottom are replaced every couple of years when they fill up with names. A large portion of autism spectrum disorders. About 40% of them have been in human genetics since around 40,000 BCE. Goddamn genetic bottleneck causing supervolcano eruption. It's theorized that modern times are much harder on autistic people. It's louder and more stressful. An autistic person who may struggle now with fluorescent lighting, loud office spaces, and chaotic schedules may have flourished being a shepherd or a baker hundreds of years ago. Deleted. The wealthiest of the ancient Minoans had very close to modern day plumbing. The entire Minoan culture is really fascinating, not to mention their poor choice of clothing lol. The world in general. The theory that if all of the Earth's history were laid out on a calendar, our current century would only make up the last 10 seconds or so of the 31st of December. Always blows my mind to consider it that way. It's smaller than that. The last 6 minutes modern humans evolved. The Roman Republic was about the last 7 seconds. Columbus arrived in America 1 second to midnight. The arrival of people in North America. Many scientists believe a sea route was used to navigate to the continent much earlier than the Bering Land Bridge. This is hard to prove, however, because any archaeological sites that could be found along shorelines are now well underwater. The dinosaurs. They didn't know what grass was. Grasses first started to appear at the end of the dinosaur era and may have contributed to the decline of the dinosaurs, which had begun before the KT event. Non-avian dinosaurs, to be precise. Birds have adapted to living off of grass seeds just fine. Edit. New evidence dinosaurs doing fine then, and it really was the asteroid that finished them off. A Native American empire nearly a third of the size of the present-day United States existed in the Great Lakes region at the time the Old Testament of the Bible was thought to be written. Local town has a huge mound from them and a fair bit of history. Stupid name though, they decided to call it Moundsville.